The wagon came up the Anchor Bar Road at 4 in the afternoon with a busted fellow and 4 children in the bed, and Elbridge Cathcart, who was 48 years old and had not spoken to a woman at his own gate in 6 years, came out wiping his hands on a grain sack and said the thing he had been rehearsing since the storekeeper's note reached him that morning. "Your children have a home here," he said. "All 4 of them. That part isn't a question, and it isn't wages. That's just the house." Tryphena Waldrop was 38. She had come 1,100 miles from the Kennebec River in Maine with 4 children, a trunk of clothes, and a long crate of tools that no man in Kelso County, North Dakota, would have known the use of. She had answered an advertisement for a housekeeper. She had expected to be looked over like a horse. "You haven't asked what I can do," she said. "I've got a cook's job and a house nobody laughs in," Cathcart said. "You can tell me what you can do come Sunday." What she could do would not come out until November. And when it did, it would change the arithmetic of that ranch, that river, and that county for 40 years. The house sat under a chalk-colored bluff shaped like a chimney, 2 miles above the Little Missouri, in the broken country the cattlemen called the Badlands, and everybody else called nothing at all. Cathcart ran the Anchor Bar with 1,100 head and a mortgage of $2,340 falling due the 1st of March. His wife, Lucretia, had died peacefully in her sleep in 1887, and he had let the West Room stay shut ever since. On the mantel he kept a payroll book. It was not a large book. It had 9 names in it. In the fall of 1886, he had sold his hay standing because the price was good and the grass looked to hold. By January, there was no hay in the county to buy at any price. He kept his cattle alive on cottonwood browse and lost more than half of them anyway, and in December he had stood in his own barn and paid off 9 men with money he had ridden to Dickinson to borrow, because there was no winter work at the Anchor Bar, and a man who cannot pay a crew has no right to keep one. They had all shaken his hand. That was the part that stayed. 2 of them never got hired anywhere again, and one, a Missouri boy named Ely Dunphy, had gone down the river in a coat too thin for it, and nobody had heard of him since. Every year since, when the leaves went and the outfits paid off their summer hands, Elbridge Cathcart took the book down and read the 9 names and put it back. He had never told anyone why. Tryphena Waldrop found the book in October while she was cleaning the mantel, and read it, and put it back exactly square, and said nothing at all. Her own dead were kept plainer. Dyer Waldrop had been 41, a Kennebec iceman like his father before him, and he had died peacefully of a lung fever in the spring of 1891, in a house with a river view and a mortgage. 2 warm winters in a row had finished what the artificial ice plants started. The Waldrop ice houses on the Kennebec had gone to the bank, and the tools had gone in a crate with Tryphena because they were the only thing the bank had not wanted. The children knew what the crate was. Orson was 12 and had been on the ice since he was 7. Vinny was 10 and could keep a tally book in a straight column. Cephas was 7 and quiet and useful. Lovey was 4 and named every horse she met, whether it had a name already or not. By the 2nd week, they had the run of the place. By the 4th, Lovey was riding the feed sled on Cathcart's knee, and old Wash Doyne, 63 years old and 40 of them spent in a saddle, had begun taking his boots off at the kitchen door without being asked. Cathcart never once said the word family. But he began cutting his beef in 7 pieces instead of 2, and he opened the West Room and aired it, and he stopped riding out before daylight to avoid the noise of a full table. Then came the 15th of November, and the thing nobody had thought to look at for 11 years finally got looked at. He had taken her down to the deadwater to show her where the ice would be safe to chop for the stock tank. It was a backwater of the Little Missouri, a slow 2 miles of dead current behind a gravel bar, sheltered from the wind by the bluffs, fed clean by a spring seep at the head of it. Tryphena Waldrip stood on the bank a long time. "Mr. Cathcart," she said, "how deep does this make?" 20 inches most winters, 2 foot if it's a hard one. How long does it hold? January through February. Nobody's ever asked me that before. It'll go 26 inches in this country, she said. It's still water. It's shaded till 10, and there's no mud in it. That's the best ice I have ever stood on in my life, and I was raised standing on the best ice in America. She turned around. You are sitting on a crop, sir, and you've been driving your cattle across it for 11 years. Cathcart looked at the ice and then at her, and said the only thing he could think of, which was, ice. Ice, she said. The refrigerator cars at your division point are iced from a house that hauls its ice 90 miles by rail from Minnesota. I asked the agent. He told me what they pay for it, and then he told me twice, because he thought I'd heard it wrong. That night, she wrote out the figures on the back of a feed bill, and Vinnie added the column twice, and the number at the bottom of it was larger than the mortgage. There was one man between the anchor bar and that number, and his name was Hosmer Wardlaw. Wardlaw was 57, ran the platform ice house at Chimney Bluff on a contract with the refrigerator line, and had written into that contract in 1889 the clause that ice would be bought only from chartered companies of record, not from ranchers, not from widows. He was a dry, correct man in a good coat who had lived in the county 9 years without ever being invited anywhere twice. He heard her out in his office, standing the whole time. The clause exists for a reason, Mrs. Waldrip, he said. Ice is not hay. A man who cuts it wrong loses the whole stack in a February thaw, and the line loses its beef, and I lose my position. I have seen it done. You've done it, she said. It was not a guess. She had been in the trade her whole life, and she knew the year and the river the way a rancher knows a hard winter. Where? Wardlaw's jaw moved. Hudson River, 74, 12,000 tons packed wet. It went out from the middle and took the house with it, and 11 men went unpaid that spring because I would not let another company's crew onto my field to save what could be saved. He straightened a paper that did not need it. I have never told that in this county. I won't be telling it either, Tryphena said, but I've got a spring-fed slough with no mud in it and a man's tools, and I know how to pack a stack so it doesn't go. Come look at the field before you say no. That's all I'm asking, and I'll pay for the buggy. He came. He stood on the deadwater on the 28th of November with a 2-inch auger, and pulled a core, and held it up to the light, and did not say a word for a long while. Clear as window glass, he said at last. Where did you learn to read a seep? From a man who's dead. Will you write me a price? I'll write a price, Wardlaw said, to the Anchor Bar Ice Company, chartered, of record. Mr. Cathcart may sign it. I will not put my name to a private person, and that is not spite, madam. It is the clause, and I wrote it after I had cost 11 men their wages, so I intend to keep it. Then charter it, she said to Cathcart in the buggy going home. But the crew list is mine, and it's mine in my hand. He agreed before they reached the second gate. He agreed, if he was honest, before she finished the sentence. It cost him $90 to charter, and $400 more he did not have to borrow for plank, hay, and a marking plow, and he lay awake the whole of one night over it. But he had gone into the barn in the morning and found her already there, on a nail keg with the crate open, oiling a 40-year-old ice saw with her thumb on the flat of the blade, and Orson beside her doing the same to the tongs. Mr. Cathcart, she said without looking up, how many men rode out of this county in December last year? He counted, 30, 35. Then write down 41 names, she said, because that's what I need on that ice, and I'd sooner they were yours. He got the payroll book off the mantel and brought it to the barn, and she looked at the 9 names in it for a moment and turned to a clean page and handed it back. The word went out through the bunkhouses at Chimney Bluff the first week of December. Winter work, 21 days, $1.75 a day and dinner, and no man needed to know a thing about ice because the woman would teach him. 41 came. 43 signed. She kept the 2 extra on and put them to hauling marsh hay. They marked the field on the 9th of January, and old Wash Doyne, who had never in his life seen a horse walk a straight line on purpose, drove the marking plow while Orson led at the head, scoring the deadwater into a checkerboard of cakes, 22 inches square, straight as a section line. Vinnie kept the tally at a plank table on the bank with a stone on her papers, and it was Vinnie who ruled the column that the railroad clerk later copied verbatim because he could not improve on it. Cephas kept the fire under 2 coffee pots and never let either one go cold in 21 days. Lovey rode the empty sled back down the ramp and named all 11 horses on the crew, including 2 that had been called nothing but Big and Other for 9 years. No child of hers set a foot past the second score line. She had drawn it herself with the plow on the first morning, in front of every man there, and said it once. They cut 26 inches. The cakes came up the ramp, streaming and blue-white, and 41 men who had expected to spend that winter riding for grub learned in 3 days how to float a cake with a pike pole and stack a house tight, and started, by the end of the first week, to argue about it like tradesmen. 3,100 tons went into the platform ice house at Chimney Bluff between the 9th and the 30th of January, at $1.60 a ton delivered, and Hosmer Wardlaw stood on the loading ramp for 11 days of it in a good coat and told her every night what she had done wrong, which was, by the 8th day, nothing. The thaw came on the 14th of February, and it came warm and wet and out of the southwest, and it did not stop for 4 days. The anchor bar's own stack was hay-packed and safe. Wardlaw's older stack, 2,000 tons carried over from the Minnesota hauls, packed in the fall with sawdust that had lain out in an October rain, began to run, and a stack that begins to run in the middle will take the house down on top of itself. Tryphena Waldrop stood on the ramp on the 15th and did the arithmetic in front of Cathcart, out loud, because she wanted a witness. "If I leave that alone," she said, "his stack goes, and the line has no ice for the beef season, and the anchor bar sells them every ton it can cut for the next 10 years at any price we care to name." "That's true," Cathcart said. "And if I take my crew off my own field for 4 days in a thaw, I lose maybe 400 tons. That'll be too rotten to cut when it turns cold again." "That's true, too." She was quiet for a bit. Then she said, "He told me about the Hudson because he thought I could hear it. A man doesn't get offered that twice." They took 43 men off the deadwater at noon and put them through the doors of the platform ice house with hay forks, and they stripped the wet sawdust off 2,000 tons of another man's ice and repacked it with marsh hay, 4 days, dark to dark, and lost 410 tons of their own to the rot. They saved 1,900 of his. She never wrote a word of it to the railroad, and she made the crew swear off it, and when the division superintendent came out in March and asked Wardlaw how his carryover had come through a 4-day thaw in such condition, Hosmer Wardlaw told him the truth, at length, standing up, with his hat in his hands. He came to the ranch on the 26th of February with the settlement, $4,960, gross, $1,506 in wages, already paid out in cash at the plank table by Vinnie Waldrop, aged 10, in a column nobody could argue with. $612 in hay, plank, teams, and tools. Elbridge Cathcart paid the note of $2,340 in the Chimney Bluff Depot office at 10 in the morning and had $502 left, which was more money than he had held at one time since 1885. Wardlaw laid a second paper on the table beside the first. "I have struck my own clause," he said. "It was written by a man who had failed and wanted a rule to hide behind, and a rule is a poor place for a grown man to live. This is a 5-year contract for the Deadwater field, and I have put it in Mrs. Waldrop's name, because she cut it." He set his pen down. "I have also given the line notice that I will be leaving the office. I mean to spend next winter on the ice, if she'll have me on the crew." She had him on the crew. She had him on the crew for 9 years, and he taught the packing to 2 generations of Kelso County boys and died peacefully at 79 with a paid-up interest in a business he had once written a clause to keep her out of. There was one more paper, and only Tryphena ever saw it. Going through the office files that spring, she found the 1889 letter from the division superintendent that had ordered the chartered company clause written, over Wardlaw's name, after the Hudson business. Enough, in the right hands, to have taken his position and his character together. She put it in the kitchen stove without reading it twice, and never told him it had existed. They were married in the Chimney Bluff Church on the 9th of May, 1894, by which time everyone in the county had been calling her Mrs. Cathcart for 4 months anyway, and had grown impatient with the correction. He was 49, she was 39. There was no fuss made about either number. Old Wash Doyne gave her away, and cried about it, and denied it for 11 years. Lovey, 5 by then, named the church horse. The payroll book stayed on the mantel, but it had 43 names in it now, and then 61, and then, by 1901, 94, and a man in Kelso County who wanted a winter that paid did not have to ride out of it in December to find one. Ely Dunphy, the Missouri boy in the thin coat, wrote from Kansas in 1897 in answer to an advertisement Tryphena had been running quietly in 4 papers for 3 years and cut ice on the Deadwater for the next 19 winters. Cathcart never made a speech about any of it. The nearest he came was one January evening on the bank, watching 40 men float cakes up a ramp under lantern light while his wife stood at the tally table with her hand on a 10-year-old's shoulder, checking a column. "I was going to sell in the spring," he said. "92. I had the letter written." "I know," Tryphena said. "I found it when I cleaned the mantel." "You never said." "It wasn't mine to say. It was yours to burn." He had burned it, in fact, on the 28th of November, in the buggy coming back from the Deadwater, with an ice core melting in his coat pocket, and he had never been able to explain to himself why he did it that particular day. Standing on the bank, he thought he understood it. He had told her at the gate that her children had a home. He had believed, saying it, that he was the one giving something. In 1938, the county put up a small museum in the old depot at Chimney Bluff, and Lovey Cathcart Doyne, who was 49 and had spent her whole life within 9 miles of the Deadwater, hung the tools herself: 2 Kennebec saws, a breaking bar, a pair of tongs, and the marking plow with the worn near handle. A young man from the State Historical Society asked her what the ranch had been saved by. Exactly, for the label. He wanted it short. Lovey looked at the case a while. "Write that it wasn't the ranch," she said. The ranch was the smallest thing she saved. Put down that before she came, 35 men rode out of this county every December, and after she came, none did, and my father got to keep being the man he'd have been if 87 hadn't happened to him. The young man said he could not fit all of that on a card. "Then write ice." Lovey said, "The rest of it, anybody around here can still tell you." The end.